again brought to its knees by violence. Amongst the thugs, more sinister elements are now at work. The dark forces of racism and fascism. Now they're seeking to take violence from the terraces and turn it on ordinary people. Meet Charlie Sargent. He runs a right-wing terror organisation. Their victims include women, teachers and pensioners. Meet his right-hand man, Will Browning. He's known as Wilf the Beast. His task is to recruit political terrorists from the terraces. Tonight, World in Action investigates the explosive mix of fascism and football, and exposes the brutal men who boast that the nightmare returns.
And this is a disgrace. It is a scandal. It should never have happened.
Dublin, 16th of February 1995. A friendly international football match between Ireland and England.
And you can just see all sorts of things raining over. People from here scattered now over the barriers here for their own safety. There was a lot of injuries, adults injured, belts of steel and wood. And in particular, one of our own cameramen here had a fractured skull and spent 2 weeks in hospital, you know.
Scenes at Lansdowne Road recall the horrific football violence of a decade ago. But this time, there was a difference, a new and sinister political edge.
But I think a small hardcore, probably no more than 50 at most, were instrumental in using that game to prove a political point.
I could see one guy in the top tier of the stand, he seemed to have a red overalls, and he was producing a C1A flag. It wasn't something that was draped over like the Union Jacks and so. It was something that was just getting produced in sports. And he seemed to be, you know, making signs down below, and everything seemed to revolve around him on the top tier, you know.
C18 are the initials of Combat 18. They were originally set up as security for far-right groups, but now have a life of their own. The name is taken from the first and 8 letters of the alphabet, the initials of Adolf Hitler, and it reflects the group's Nazi politics.
What about your relationship with the UDA? Would you like to tell us about your relationship with the UDA, Mr. Sargent?
World in Action first exposed Charlie Sargent, the man behind Combat 18, 2 years ago. Since then, he and his organisation have waged their campaign of terror unchecked and with increasing ferocity.
Would you like to tell us about... Put it in your way, this was going to happen.
Their agenda is racial violence. They attack physically members of the Asian community, the black community, members of the Jewish community. They incite violence through their actions and through their publications.
These publications list scores of innocent people as legitimate targets. Phone calls are a favourite method of intimidation.
Just let her know that Combat 18 have got on her. We're going to take her out, and we'll be watching you.
Across the country, a series of vicious attacks demonstrates the willingness of Combat 18 to carry out its threats of violence. Ian MacDonald is a bus driver. As secretary of Leeds Trades Union Council, he complained about racism in the workplace.
I had a telephone call early hours of one morning in July from an organisation called Combat 18 that said they were going to come round and see me. 2 weeks later, it happened. They came round at 2:45 on a Sunday morning. There was my wife and her lad in the house, all asleep. I was in the bedroom at the rear of the house. I heard glass smashing, turned a light on. The immediate reaction was one of fear. I went downstairs to find that my patio doors, my back door and side window had been smashed through. A week after the attack, they rang me to ask if I'd learnt my lesson.
Like many of Combat 18's victims, Ian MacDonald lives constantly with the threat of further attacks.
I'm always vulnerable. I drive buses for a living, which means I'm out driving a bus by myself 5-6 days in the week. I'm always vulnerable to such attacks. But again, I cannot let anyone intimidate me on my principles and my beliefs.
The most recent Combat 18 magazine has stepped up the call to terror. It gives details of bomb making and gun training. The hardcore of Combat 18 talk of exterminating Jews and creating a race war. But it's nationalism and a basic call to violence that they use to gain wider support.
In the last year, 18 months, they've moved into a more violent mode of conduct, especially through football violence. Their contacts within football clubs are quite extensive, and for them the promotion of violence at football matches is a way of gaining adherence and strength.
Information from inside the shadowy world of Combat 18 is hard to come by, but one of their members, disturbed by their increasingly indiscriminate violence, has broken ranks to talk about their involvement in football. We've used an actor to represent his words.
Yeah, we look to football hooligans to recruit. Combat 18 has links with a number of firms. Hooligans are whites, and they're proud of their country just like we are. And we can give them the opportunity of a good off against niggers, IRA supporters and Reds.
I think they're more organised, I think they're more cunning, much more devious than they ever were. I think the problem is they probably put their message across better to some of the youngsters who follow football, and certain parts of their politics I can see may well be attractive to some of the younger elements who follow football.
The England World Cup qualifying matches in 1993 provided an opportunity for the move into football.
During the summer of 1993, Charlie and a few of the C-18 inner corps met with some of the top boys from a number of crews, like Chelsea, Arsenal, Millwall, Portsmouth and Oxford. We've been able to take some of the top boys from these firms into our other activities. None of this leafleting nonsense, but to deal with our opponents.
In Oslo, Combat 18 members were at the centre of the trouble which started in the Polite bar. The next game was in Rotterdam, and Combat 18 boasted in their magazine of their success in causing violence.
C-18 managed to send a 50-strong expeditionary force to Holland, and despite hassle from the Dutch old bill, they still managed to whip up enough trouble wherever they went. C-18 football fans can add this to their list of results. Well done, lads.
The opportunity for organised violence is not the only thing that attracts hooligans to Combat 18.
The one thing we do find that runs through the football scene is the violently anti-Irish feeling. The one chant we hear when England play abroad, when the domestic teams play abroad, is the no surrender to the IRA.
Ireland, an anti-IRA, is always good for us, because the leading boys are loyal to their country, and so are sick of seeing our boys being killed by the IRA. There was a pro-Ireland march in London the other year. There were hundreds of us, all the main firms. That's the way Charlie would like us to develop.
Combat 18 has always had strong links with loyalist terrorists. They've used this hard man reputation to gain status among football hooligans.
We have video evidence of certain well-known football hooligans from around the UK gathering in public houses along the march route, giving the Nazi salute through the windows as the march has gone past.
Amongst this gang from the Chelsea headhunters firm are leading members of C-18. Last year, they linked up again to launch an attack on an Irish pub in London. Combat 18 boasted of it in their magazine, The Order.
A group of 80 nationalist and loyalist Chelsea fans attacked the Old Bell pub in Kilburn Road, smashing windows and pelting the terrified Troops Out demonstrators inside the pub with bottles and bricks.
We were expecting something, you know, because it was in the wind that something might happen, you know. But it did happen. A brick came through the window and the whole glass smashed all over the place. I was watching the door and they burst in. About 6, I'd say. And they said, "Come on, you Irish bastards." and they started firing stools behind the bar. They smashed all the optics, and then I think they were going to start in the customers.
Combat 18's efforts over the last 18 months paid off with their biggest success to date in Dublin. The anti-Irish feelings of a large number of hooligans were exploited by Combat 18 organisers.
Combat 18 is not an exclusive club, and it's not the sort of thing that you join. I think a lot of people who went to Ireland joined the so-called Combat 18 banner. They were there for the day, just to prove their political point for that day.
So we have to remember that they are a small group, but a small group can do a lot of damage. Their influence is much more widespread, and if they can incite violence through much larger crowds, then they do become a real problem.
Lansdowne Road, like every other England international, saw the coming together of scores of different firms from all over the country.
Well, your firms are like segregated. You've got your runners, and these are well known through the country. You've got firms like Leicester Baby Squad, Nottingham Forest Executive Crew. They're your slashers. They use weapons and scarcers. They hide behind the police mouth off. Then you've got your Cockneys. There's only one firm really, that's Chelsea.
Chelsea's firm, the Headhunters, has strong links with Combat 18, stretching back over many years.
Some of our top boys were leading faces in a number of crews, particularly the Chelsea Headhunters. Charlie, although an Arsenal fan, used to run with the Chelsea Headhunters in the 80s. You see, he was best mates with Chubby, who was one of the Headhunters' top boys. He was also a London skin, and they were Chelsea.
But Combat 18's connections with the Headhunters go deeper than friendship. This season, Chelsea hooligans have again been heavily involved in violence. And for Combat 18, a campaign of intimidation started on the first day of the season when they went down to Chelsea looking for trouble. They soon found it when they came across an anti-Nazi poster in a street near the ground.
My neighbours told me that the Chelsea football matches will be starting, and that when they do, I'd be wise to take the poster down.
She found out why when she was visited by 4 Chelsea headhunters. One of them was Charlie Sargent's brother, Steve Sargent.
I heard a banging on the window and on the front door. I went out in a storm and opened the door, and there was 4 men standing on my doorstep, and they told me that if I didn't take my poster down by later on that day, then I'd have all my windows done in and I'll be done in as well.
Fortunately for Susan O'Rourke, Steve Sargent was arrested before he could carry out his threats. Members of the Chelsea Independent Supporters Association were not so lucky. These Chelsea fans had taken a stand against racism.
They're a great bunch of lads. They're all friendly, they all get on with each other. There's never no arguments or disruptions or anything like that. Basically, you couldn't wish for a better bunch of football supporters, you know.
But Combat 18 were determined to stamp out the opposition to their racist views. In the Finborough Arms, they launched a savage attack on the independent supporters, an attack which put 4 people in hospital.
5 o'clock, jam solid, absolute jam solid. I can't let anyone in. The next thing, some chappie come out to me and he said to me, I think you better go up to the pool table, Governor. I think there's going to be, you know, a disturbance up there. It was like a tidal wave coming towards me. I mean, it was something that I have never, ever seen in my life before, and I never want to see it again. There were women screaming, kids screaming, glasses, bottles, pool cues, pool balls, tables, chairs, everything just flying all over the place. And all you could hear above, within the screams and such like was Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil.
These scumbags really got a taste of white power as they were systematically smashed with tables and cut with beer glasses and basically kicked the signal was given and we left the pub to a chorus of Chelsea C18, Chelsea C18.
The man behind this attack was Chelsea headhunter and Combat 18 member Mark Atkinson. it was not to be his last attack on the Chelsea independent supporters. This season was Chelsea's first in Europe for 23 years. C18 took the opportunity to try and increase support amongst Chelsea's right-wing fans.
It's easier to operate abroad. The filth ain't watching us over there. When Chelsea played in the Czech Republic, we took a crew of about 50 out. On the way over, we stopped at a concentration camp and basically just pissed about.
They later published the pictures of their visit in their magazine, with an article claiming the atrocities never took place. But it was at Chelsea's game, watched by the Czech police, that Combat 18 made its biggest show of strength.
They were standing in the middle of the, outside the gates, with their flags up. They had a sort of small circle, small posse of other fans around them. They looked pretty heavy.
After the match, Combat 18 made another attack on a member of the Chelsea independent supporters.
They leapt onto the coach, up the steps, and the first one punched him really hard in the head, in the forehead. He sat down again, and the guy behind him raised his fist, and in it he had some kind of spike. It's about 3 inches long. It looked, from where I was sitting, like an electrical screwdriver, and tried to stab him. Came down very, very fast. He missed, luckily. If it had hit him in a vital spot, like in his head or his neck or something like that, it would have killed him.
They might have survived that assassination attempt, but their luck's going to run out sooner than they think. And Chelsea will be cleansed of this piece of shit and all the other so-called anti-fascists.
And they started thumping on the windows of the coach. They then, as we drove off, raised their black wind cheaters to reveal Combat 18 shirts.
C18 member and Chelsea headhunter Atkinson was again involved. But here, he had an even more frightening accomplice.
It was Will Browning, the one they call Wilf the Beast. This bloke Wilf is like a bad nightmare. He's from South East London. He's crazy. He's always busy with a tool. It was him in Prague with a chisel.
Will Browning is a kickboxing instructor. He's regarded as Combat 18's top organiser in football and acts as Charlie Sargent's right-hand man. When earlier this year the police seized copies of Combat 18's latest magazine, it was from the homes of Charlie Sargent and Will Browning. In spite of the race-hate material contained in these magazines, neither Will Browning nor Charlie Sargent have been charged. While Mark Atkinson, Charlie Sargent and Will Browning continue to push their message in football, the violence they encourage spreads. 10 days ago in Halifax, Combat 18 made their most recent attack. This time on a group of school teachers.
It was comic relief. We'd all been eating Irish stew. It was St Patrick's Day. We'd been singing, having a really good time, and then all of a sudden the pub was full of skinheads and they all disappeared upstairs. It was quite weird. It was quite strange. And we went up to see what was happening.
One of them turned around and said, "We're Cockneys." And they were, and all their accents were very much from London, that shocked me. One of the men said, "Your ethnic friends are not welcome." To which point things started to get abusive. He started calling my friend a lesbian, to which we laughed, a very nervous laugh, but we did laugh because it sounded so ridiculous. And then one of them said to her, "I bet she's a Jew with that long nose, that big nose of hers."
They came out, who stood standing at the top of the stairs, said, "You Reds think we're just BMP teenagers that you can scare off. We ain't, we're C18 and you're dead." And then they hit us. A lot of punches landed on my head. I don't really remember what happened. My nose, my mouth, everything was bleeding. My friend jumped in to try and protect me, and basically I heard her nose crunch. It was horrible.
I got punched twice in the face. I got a broken nose. I don't remember the second punch. I was stunned. My glasses flew off. And I just remember this blind panic, this absolute panic, as 20 to 25 skinheads punched and kicked 8 of us down a flight of stairs.
The teachers had no idea of the identity of their assailants. We asked them both to look at some photographs. Amongst them were pictures of leading members of C18.
He was the one who told us he was Cockneys, and he's also the one that told us he was Combat 18. They were very proud of who they were. Oh God, yes. It's him. He's the one that assaulted me. Yeah.
What do you feel looking at him?
Fear. It brings it all back. I'm shaking now. It brings the pain back. It brings back horrible thoughts, thoughts that I'd never thought I'd experienced in my entire life. I never want to experience again.
The teachers identified their attackers as Charlie Sargent and Will Browning. Browning is a violent man motivated by racist politics. As a headhunter and as Combat 18's main organiser in football, Browning seeks to exploit violence on the terraces for his own political ends.
Combat 18 is a small group, but one with a disproportionate influence. If its activities are unchecked, then it could lead to serious problems within football.
Their influence among hooligan gangs, with all the potential for violence that entails, is causing concern among MPs.
Well, I asked the Home Secretary what evidence the government had of the involvement of Combat 18 with the activities of Chelsea supporters. He simply says, well, there is no evidence directly of Combat 18 involvement amongst Chelsea fans. Now, anybody who studies football and anybody who knows about what's been going on for a number of years in football knows very well that far-right groups have been very active in a number of clubs, and one of those clubs is Chelsea. And I get the impression that either the government doesn't want to tell us or they haven't got the information because they're out of touch, and that worries me.
I thought I was coping until I went back into work, because I've been suffering from a bit of agoraphobia since it happened. And just the jostling of school children and the noise and all the kids changing at bell time put me into a blind panic.
Are you going to help Mummy?
They're my jeans.
I have 2 children, and the older one, my 3-year-old, was very worried. Oh, Mummy, what happened to your face? You've got a poorly face. And at the time, my nose was much worse, as well as round my mouth. And I said, I thought about telling him I fell, and then I thought, no, tell him the truth. And I said, somebody hit Mummy. And he said, was it a monster?
We went to ask Mr. Browning how he could defend his attacks on football fans and innocent members of the public.
What justification can you have for that? What is your involvement with football? Please leave the camera alone. Don't touch that camera. Mr. Browning, Mr. Browning, please don't touch the camera. Were you also one of the ones responsible for the trouble in Dublin? Mr. Browning, please don't hit the camera. Do you think it's right that your magazine that you distribute, Mr. Browning, gloats about the attacks that have been made on innocent supporters? Yeah. Why do you think it's right that it gloats about attacks on innocent supporters, Mr. Browning? George, watch out! The man's got a screwdriver.
The Attorney General is considering prosecuting Browning for distribution of race-hate material. Our information on his involvement in the attack in Halifax has been requested by the police. 3 years after Combat 18 started its campaign,
You must commit them.